"Get your hands off my daughter!" The courtroom froze as a uniformed officer twisted Maya's arms behind her back, her terrified eyes searching the crowd for help. The judge's gavel slammed, but the chaos only grew louder. In that moment, no one cared about the case. Everyone's attention was on the trembling black teen being dragged away by a cop whose face showed no mercy. But just as Maya's cries echoed through the marble halls, the heavy doors burst open. A man in navy dress blues strode in, his voice cutting through the noise. "That's my child!" What happened next left everyone speechless. Would justice finally be served? Or would this be another story buried in silence? Maya Johnson was used to being the quiet one in the room. At 16, she'd learned to keep her head down, focus on her grades, and let her smile do the talking. Her father, Marcus, was her hero, a decorated Navy SEAL who taught her to stand tall, even when the world tried to make her feel small. They lived in a modest apartment just outside the city, where Maya's weekends were filled with laughter, homework, and stories of her dad's adventures overseas. But life wasn't always easy. Maya knew what it felt like to be watched a little too closely in stores, or to hear whispers at school about her attitude when she spoke up. Still, she believed in fairness, in the power of doing the right thing. That's why, on the day she was called to testify as a witness in a local court case, Maya dressed in her best, determined to show respect and courage, just like her father taught her. She never expected the courtroom to become a battleground. As she sat quietly, waiting for her name to be called, Maya felt the weight of a stare from across the room. A police officer whose eyes lingered a little too long, whose presence made her uneasy. She tried to shake it off, focusing on her father's words. "You're stronger than you think, Maya." But deep down, she sensed that today would test her strength in ways she could never imagine. The courtroom buzzed with quiet conversations and the shuffling of papers, but Maya felt every sound fade into the background as she waited for her turn. She clutched her notebook, knuckles white, trying to steady her breathing. Her father, Marcus, had squeezed her hand before she entered, whispering, "I'm proud of you, kiddo. Just tell the truth." Those words echoed in her mind, a fragile shield against the anxiety building in her chest. When Maya's name was finally called, she stood up, smoothing her skirt, and walked to the witness stand. The judge gave her a gentle nod, but the officer from earlier, Officer Reynolds, stood by the door, arms crossed, eyes cold and unblinking. Maya tried to ignore him, focusing on the questions from the attorney. She answered clearly, her voice steady, recounting what she'd seen outside her school the week before. But as she spoke, she noticed Officer Reynolds whispering to another deputy, both of them glancing her way. The questions grew more pointed, and Maya felt the tension in the room shift. The defense attorney's tone sharpened, almost accusing. "Are you sure you saw what you say you saw, Miss Johnson?" Maya nodded, but her heart pounded. She could feel the weight of suspicion pressing down on her, as if she were the one on trial. Suddenly, the judge called for a short recess. Maya stepped down, relief flooding her for a moment, until Officer Reynolds approached. He blocked her path, his voice low but threatening. "You think you're brave, huh? Making trouble for good people?" Maya froze, her eyes darting around for help, but the hallway was nearly empty. She tried to step around him, but he grabbed her arm, squeezing hard enough to make her wince. "Let go of me," Maya whispered, her voice trembling. But Reynolds only tightened his grip. "You people never learn, do you?" He sneered, his words sharp as knives. Maya's fear turned to anger, but she remembered her father's advice. "Stay calm. Don't give them a reason." She pulled her arm free and hurried back to the courtroom, her heart racing. The next hour passed in a blur. Maya tried to focus on the proceedings, but she could feel Reynolds' eyes on her, burning with silent threat. When the judge finally called the case to a close, Maya stood to leave, eager to find her father and escape the suffocating tension. But as she reached the exit, Reynolds stepped in front of her, blocking the door. Without warning, he grabbed her wrist and twisted it behind her back. "You're under arrest for perjury," he announced loudly, his voice echoing off the marble walls. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as Maya struggled, panic rising in her chest. "I didn't do anything," she cried, but Reynolds ignored her, snapping handcuffs around her wrists. The judge banged his gavel, demanding order, but chaos erupted. Maya's father, who had been waiting outside, heard the commotion and rushed in, his face a mask of shock and fury. "What's going on?" Marcus shouted, pushing through the crowd. Reynolds turned, his grip on Maya unyielding. "Step back, sir. This doesn't concern you." But Marcus wasn't backing down. The room seemed to hold its breath as father and officer locked eyes, the tension thick enough to cut. Maya's tears streamed down her face as she pleaded, "Dad, help me!" The scene was spiraling out of control, and everyone knew something. Explosive was about to happen, but no one could predict just how far it would go. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Maya's cries echoed off the walls as Officer Reynolds forced her toward the exit, his grip bruising, his face set in stone. Marcus's training kicked in. He moved with purpose, his voice booming across the room. "Let her go! That's my daughter!" But Reynolds only tightened his hold, shoving Maya forward as if she were a criminal. People in the gallery stood up, some shouting, others frozen in disbelief. The judge pounded the gavel, but no one was listening anymore. Marcus pushed past the bailiff, his Navy SEAL instincts overriding every ounce of fear. He reached Reynolds in 3 strides, his presence commanding the room. "You're making a mistake," Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. "Release her! Now!" Reynolds sneered, refusing to back down. "She lied under oath. She's under arrest." Maya's breath came in ragged sobs, her wrists aching in the cuffs. "Dad, please!" she choked out, her voice barely more than a whisper. Marcus looked his daughter in the eyes, then turned to the officer. "You want to arrest someone? Arrest me, but you're not laying another hand on my child." For a split second, the room went silent. Reynolds hesitated, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. But then, with a defiant glare, he shoved Maya toward Marcus, sending her stumbling into her father's arms. Marcus caught her, holding her tight. "It's okay, baby. I've got you." But as he shielded Maya, he looked up and locked eyes with Reynolds, his gaze promising that this fight was far from over. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Would justice finally break through the walls of prejudice? Or would Maya and her father become just another story lost to silence? The aftermath was a blur of flashing lights, raised voices, and trembling hands. As Maya clung to her father, the courtroom finally began to see the truth. Witnesses stepped forward, their outrage impossible to ignore. Cell phones captured every second, Reynolds' aggression, Maya's fear, Marcus's unwavering courage. The judge, shaken by what he'd witnessed, ordered an immediate review of the arrest. Within hours, Maya was released, her record cleared. Officer Reynolds was placed on leave, pending investigation, but the scars ran deeper than bruises. For days, Maya struggled to sleep, replaying the moment over and over. Marcus sat by her side, holding her hand, reminding her that her voice mattered, that standing up, even when it's terrifying, is how change begins. Their story spread quickly, sparking protests and conversations across the city. People who had never spoken out before found the courage to demand justice, not just for Maya, but for every black child who's ever been silenced or threatened. Maya's life would never be the same. She learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to speak, to fight, even when your voice shakes. And Marcus, the Navy SEAL who'd faced danger on distant shores, realized that the hardest battles are sometimes fought at home. This wasn't just about one courtroom, one officer, or one family. It was a mirror held up to a society still struggling with the weight of its own prejudice. How many more stories like Maya's go unheard? How many more voices are waiting for someone to listen? If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Share it. Speak up. Ask yourself, what would you do if it was your child, your friend, your community? Because real change starts with all of us right now.